This past week, Donald Trump, the President of the United States, tweeted that missiles were on their way to Syria, that they were smart, whatever that means. And there was a response from some Russian officials that they would shoot down the rockets and also shoot at their launch sites. This isn't the only incident that has caused many different forum posts to emerge talking about the start of World War III. Now, whether or not we're actually going to see World War III, I think is very unlikely. I think you need to take in consideration modern warfare and cyber warfare and all these things. But there's another interesting thing that happened several months ago that I saw, and this was The Daily Show ran a segment called Can Liberals Survive the Apocalypse? And they basically just made fun of liberals. They chose somebody who was like a fat guy with a katana, and it was a setup. It wasn't legitimate. But it got me wondering, would a liberal actually survive the apocalypse? Or can liberals actually survive the apocalypse? So today on the Culture War podcast, we are joined by Johnny Benson of Bug Out Boys, also known as Grimm. And we are going to be asking the question and talking about whether or not liberals can survive the apocalypse. Before we get started, make sure you subscribe on iTunes, or if you're on YouTube, hit that subscribe button, click that little bell, but also go to patreon.com/Timcast and become a patron today. There are many different tiers to choose from, most notably is Tier 1. At $10 per month, you get access to behind-the-scenes photos and videos when available, and bonus commentary videos. So please consider supporting my journalism by becoming a patron today. So thank you all for joining us today. My name is Tim Poole. I'm a journalist. You can find me basically everywhere on social media at Timcast, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram. Joining me today, we have
Johnny Benson, aka Grimm from Bug Out Boys. You can find us at pretty much all social media at Bug Out Boys TV. So Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, where all our media is going.
My name is Emily Molly. I'm also a journalist, and I'm on Twitter and Minds at MomesMolly, MOMESMOLLI.
I always forget to say that. If you're not familiar with Minds, it's MINDS.com, and I hate Facebook. I don't know if you know what Minds is, but it's like,
I don't actually.
I hate to call it alternative because it just is a social media platform, but it's kind of like Facebook, but Facebook's really bad. So you can find me on there at Timcast as well. I always forget to say that, but I use it a lot, so there you go.
I'll have to check it out.
Yeah. So the question, and it's honestly, I mean, it's the question's kind of facetious. Will liberals survive the apocalypse? And I would say that the question is obviously, it's kind of a fake question, because what does it even mean, really? Like, obviously the Daily Show segment was a joke, but with, there's an actual fear of international conflict. I mean, you've got the ramp up of the Russia rhetoric of Russian interference, and what it is funny because Russia calls it Russophobia. But there's a real, I guess, tension brewing between the U.S. and Russia over the past several years even. And now the conflict in Syria escalating with an actual Twitter announcement of a missile strike. So I have a source who works in armed forces who said that from what they're hearing, they sound like it's imminent. And keep in mind, this was recorded a few days ago, so it may have already happened. I don't know. But let's say everything goes bad and a war happens, and then the world falls into total chaos. There's like an assumption that conservatives will survive and liberals won't. Well, I consider myself a liberal. I think I would survive. But let's just start the conversation. I'll throw it to you, Johnny.
All right.
Will liberals survive the apocalypse?
I think, yeah, some of them will. I think
Some of them.
Some of them. But I also would say that some conservatives would make it too. It's not that's a blanket statement, and I feel that, like I said, it's a shotgun blast. It's so broad. There's varying degrees of conservatives. There's varying degrees of liberals, and you think that you would survive, and why do you think that you would survive? And you're a liberal. You consider yourself a liberal.
Yeah.
You think you'd survive because you
I've got emergency water, emergency food. I've got an SOS first aid kit. I've got first aid training. I've got hostile environment training.
Okay, so there you go. You got some skills, right? You got some skills.
I guess.
Okay, so there you go.
I'm conscious of potential threats, I suppose.
Yeah, there you go. You are conscious of a potential threat. You're actually giving it some time of day. You're giving it some thought, and after you think that through, you think, well, how can I stack the deck in my favor? So I mean, that's you. But then there may be some, fat guy with a katana and a gas mask thinking that,
he's going to survive.
He's going to survive.
Yeah.
So,
but come on, man.
I know. I mean, again, I guess if you take the generalizations, I mean, if we can use that word, that liberals technically said it that they live in cities, and the conservatives are typically out in the counties and the countries, and that county life, you have to be a little bit more self-reliant, more dependent on yourself rather than someone coming in and rescuing you. So that already kind of puts you in a very dangerous frame of mind. That if you're thinking someone is always going to come and save the day, and they don't, that puts you in a very bad position. If you take the statistics and the percentages that the liberals are in this certain area, then yeah, I think in that case, more percentage-wise, conservatives may survive versus liberals.
Let's start this off in a bit of a lighthearted approach. Sure. Zombie apocalypse.
Here we go.
Yes.
Zombie apocalypse.
It's always brought up when you're a survivalist. Let's talk about zombies.
Exactly. But I think just to lightly to poke some fun before we get into actual crisis, when you think about something where you have an actual physical threat, right, and the idea of zombies, and it doesn't have to be zombies, it could be rabid bears or something, I don't know. Sure. When you have a bunch of threats coming at you, the obvious survivalist question is, can you fire a gun? Okay. Like, if zombies are coming, have you fired a gun? Do you know how to load a gun? Do you know how to shoot a gun? Right. And when it comes to guns, yeah, I mean, there's certainly liberals who are pro-gun and have guns and train, but it's, I mean, at least assume that it's usually conservatives who know how to fire.
Yeah, again, yeah, exactly. They have grown up with them. They've used them. They're either hunting, target shooting, collectors, whatnot. Yeah, I'll give you that. And so if they know how to shoot, they know how to aim, presumably.
Yeah. So but let's say it's a full-scale invasion. Foreign country is raiding the streets of the U.S. Mm-hmm. In a situation like that, is it fair to say that liberals would have a tough time relative to conservatives? Full-scale
military invasion, so gun versus gun, not shambling zombies versus.
Yeah. The zombies is a joke. I mean, but we'll talk serious about actual external threats.
Yeah, no, that's definitely it, because I hate to poke fun, but your frying pan or your knife is not going to have anything. It's not going to really help you versus someone with any type of gun. Even a flintlock is going to be better. A black powder rifle is going to be better than a knife. You got distance, you got firepower and everything.
Technically, depending on, I would imagine actually in an urban setting with really close quarters, alleys, a lot of cover, knife might be really important.
I fully back having a knife with you at all times, and that's your backup. That doesn't jam, that doesn't run out of ammo.
Oh, there you go. So let's get off the. I think zombies and external full scale military intervention or invasion. I mean, really unlikely. What would you say in your experience is the most likely catastrophe?
I feel that some sort of a natural disaster. I mean, if you bar the sort of we're going to shoot missiles at you soon in an actual full scale war, but that's not going to really. Well, far I know, that might not touch us. But then again, as United States citizens, we've never been invaded. Well, since War of 1812, so we don't know what that's like. So, put that off to the side. I would say some sort of natural disaster, like your Katrinas and your hurricanes and your flooding. Those really hit people. And then there's always been in the different forums that I read, always a looming of financial crisis, financial collapse.
Yeah.
Because the debt just keeps on, and just when does that break? And when that breaks, then everything shuts down.
So should we go with that one? Financial economic collapse, I guess.
Economical collapse.
When
we can go with that one.
But there's also I'll give it a broad stroke. When Hurricane Sandy hit New York, I was living in New York, and the power was out for a long time. I think it might have been a couple weeks. I'm not entirely sure, but when I went to the Lower East Side, the storefronts, like the bodegas, little marketplaces, there were two guys standing on the left and the right of the door with makeshift clubs, 2x4s with things sticking out of them. Yeah. There was a line out the door, and they were letting one person in at a time. Refrigerated food had spoiled. There's no milk, sorry. I think the eggs are still good because I don't think eggs actually need to be refrigerated. Is that, do you know?
It depends on how they're stored. Eggs would have a slightly longer shelf life.
Yeah.
But, no, they actually don't need to be refrigerated because actually when people were going across the Oregon Trail, they would actually put them in lard. It was just a matter of keeping them
sealed.
Broken.
Yeah.
So they didn't have eggs.
Oh, there you go.
Back then. So
you learn something every day.
Your eggs, as long as they didn't raise in temperature enough to cook them, you probably would be all right because they're hermetically sealed. Because
Right.
So you'd be fine.
So when it came to like New York, I feel like the only reason all hell didn't break loose, I mean, there were cars flipped over in the middle of the street, like on their sides. They were just, I mean, it was crazy walking down. I think this was like I was in Alphabet City. It's like the Lower East Side. I can't remember which street I was on, but you just look down the street, you see cars everywhere because the water lifted them up and moved them around. And it was like looking at the post, like it was post-apocalyptic, and people were scared. You know, obviously the wealthier areas got their power turned back on, but the economy still existed. So even though you had these armed guards like standing in front of doors, you were still able to buy stuff.
Your barter. Use what you know
Money
as
was
cash.
yeah, right. Money was still good.
Buy stuff. Right. Money's
But
still
that,
good.
so I don't know, man. Let's riff on that. Like, what's your? I guess we should just start from the beginning before I even get into this stuff. I feel like maybe we should have did this from the get go. Why are you a survivalist?
That's how it all just got started was I sat on the back porch of my house one day and just looked out in the woods. There's this little stream back there, and I asked myself, well, if I went out there right now with what I'm wearing, I was just in some t-shirts and jeans, and could I make a fire? Let's see, it's going to get cold. We're going to at least want to maybe cook some food, and the answer was no. Would I know how to build a shelter? Now, I've had a knife on me for as long as I can remember, but do I know how to use that knife to make a shelter, to provide? And it was no. And every single question that I asked myself, if I went out there, was no. So I wanted to change that. I wanted to be self-reliant, be able to know that go into the woods, like on a hike, you get lost, you know, it doesn't take much to get hypothermia. So that's how that started, and then it just kept on blossoming this sort of, I guess, how do I say this, desire for self-reliance that started there, and then just kept on pushing it a little bit more, like we're survive for 1 day, survive for 2 days, 3 and 4, and just keep on pushing it, and then change that mindset that not only just on your person, not just your bug out bag, you know, your home, your bug out location, your car, and just go from there. That's how that went. And then,
So would you say you're conservative?
Yeah.
Because if you're liberal, then liberals would survive, right?
Right.
But no, yeah.
No. I definitely have conservative tones in my beliefs, but there are also some other liberal things that I agree with well.
So then the next question is: do you live in a rural, or I hate that word, or urban? Like you're not living in a big city. Are you?
No. I'm in a county. I'm in the county. So actually, even there, I feel like I'm a little bit too close. I would prefer
close.
Yeah, because I mean, your counties, they're great. I mean, because you feel like you're kind of in the rural area, but you're still boxed up against people, and those people are going to go to that same supermarket you as, and though you're not stacked on top of each other like a city, there's too many of you per mile of where you're at.
So now we'll wrap this back to where I was trying to go before. I was like, maybe I should have had you introduce yourself more about who you are and what you do. But talking about cities, Hurricane Sandy, economic collapse, you were just saying there's too many people stacked on top of each other.
Yeah.
What do you think would happen to New York City in the event of total economic collapse? Not pretty.
You've seen Escape from New York. You know, it's like, not pretty at all, because that's even more than the county, and I mean, how many people are a couple million?
I think Manhattan Island is like 2.5 million.
Okay, so 2.5 million on Manhattan Island.
Yeah,
and
the whole metro is like 13 million or something.
Yeah, that's insane. Of people that are literally in little boxes stacked on top of each other, and you're all going to need water, you're all going to need food, and you're all going to need to stay warm somehow.
And they're old buildings too.
Right.
A lot of them.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of them are old buildings and you're paying thousands of dollars for it. But they're not insulated, and I think survival for people is really going to kick in very quick, because no matter how many little bodegas there are or shops, they are going to run out. Usually the typical saying is that in 3 days you're going to be out of food. Your supermarkets, your gas tanks, as in the gas stations, they're all going to be out.
So this is why the question comes up. And I think, look, the Daily Show is funny. It's comedy. I get it. But when they mock liberals, like, oh, liberals won't survive, I think there's actually an important point in that most liberals are in cities. Like, I'm a city liberal. I've always been grew up in Chicago, Los Angeles. I've never lived, actually, technically, I've only ever lived in like one Republican area in Virginia, I think. I don't even know if it was Republican. But I'm like a mostly city person.
Okay.
Well, I think it kind of comes down to the politics. Like, if you think about it, liberals are more for government, like having a hand in things, and conservatives and libertarians want less government and expect to have to do things more independently. So I'm wondering if that also has a big part in it. Like, if liberals would be more reliant on having help from the government.
I think that's the thing too. You know, what I don't like about the question, but I get it. It's like it's a funny question. Is that it's not that liberals won't survive. It's that people who have a tendency to defer to others for help
Right.
are less likely to survive.
Exactly.
Completely agree.
And I think what happens is, and this is me. This is me. Like, I'm talking about my life. I grew up in a city where when I had a problem, the city could assist you. You know what I mean? Like, there's welfare programs, there's shelters, there's public systems. The people I've met who lived out in the middle, like in farmland and in like rural areas, no, like that's not going to happen. And a better example is
Maybe
when
your neighbor.
yeah,
Maybe your neighbor.
and someone you know, if you have a good relationship with them, not everybody does.
I think that's another important point. I'm guessing that larger cities aren't going to have quite the community feeling that like counties or small neighborhoods in the country would.
Yeah, like your small towns, everybody knows what happens in your
Yeah,
small town.
and be more willing to stick together.
Right, versus
A city where you can not even know the people who live on your floor.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah. I mean, just kind of just look at New York. Just walking down the street, no one makes eye contact with each other. They just
Yep.
push. I mean, I've been there, so I'm not speaking from. I've been there, and they just push through each other.
Yep,
Yeah.
that's true.
Yeah, and so they're not even acknowledging these humans that are in their immediate area. Whereas, so if that is just where they're at right now, and there's no problem, there's no shortage. Now, go to the next
Well,
step.
how connected are you with your community right now?
With where I live,
Yeah.
fairly. I mean, I know both neighbors on both sides of me. I know their kids.
Wow.
I know their jobs. I know the neighbor across the street from me. I know what he's capable of, his skill set.
You know what's crazy? I don't know what the people next to me, below me, next door to me, across the street. I don't know anybody.
Yeah, I know the jobs on both sides and across. And yeah, I know their skill sets. I mean, just because it wasn't like I went not going to like, hey, I have a question here. You got to fill out for me real quick. No, it just took some time, but just idle chit chat, going to your mailboxes, or I'm out working on a vehicle. Like, hey, what you doing there? Like, I think those communities are more likely to do that.
Yeah.
So when trouble does arise, you possibly might be more, you want to help out.
You know what I think is another interesting risk is that, do you have guns?
Yes.
Do you have a lot of guns?
I have a lot of bullets.
A lot of bullets.
I have a lot of bullets for a proper amount of guns.
So do you think if, you know, some catastrophe happened, you would be able to be armed and your neighbors would trust you and they would be armed and you'd be able to communicate and effectively defend your neighborhood?
I'd possibly. I mean, I've never asked about their training and tactical background, but yeah.
I just mean, like, you know
general.
them. You know them.
Yeah, I know them.
You know, do you think if like something happened, you'd be like, hey man, I got a gun, you know, if we need to do anything, I can.
Yeah, well, I mean, there would be a discussion beforehand about
Yeah.
that, but yeah, I mean, are you on board with this? Because that, I guess, you could. That's what we call a MAG, mutual assistance group, where it's like you have a MAG, a group of people that say that they're coming together, and that takes time to develop that as well. So, I think yes, but me as a survivalist, I would want that established.
Right.
I haven't done that yet, so I mean, it's something. But I don't plan on staying where I'm at.
Yeah.
If a disaster were to happen.
Well, so the reason I bring that up is in cities, you mentioned people push through each other.
Yeah.
You know, I live in the New York Metro, and I don't know my neighbors. Like and in fact, the only words of exchange is turn the damn volume down. Like, we don't even get along. I don't know who lives next door to me. I don't know who lives across the street from me. And the other thing is, with all these competing interests, there are two factions who have guns in New York City for the most part: the police and the criminals.
Correct.
So the like,
very, very hard to have a gun in New York City.
but so it's
New
like,
York in general, actually.
yeah, even in Jersey. So then it's, you know, maybe it's not liberals, city dwellers. Like, you're in trouble if you're in a city and the catastrophe, like the calamity happens.
Well, Ma Nature doesn't care whether your political affiliation.
Yeah.
You're still going to be hungry. You're still going to be thirsty. Your violence can ensue. Tempers can rise. It doesn't care whether you're considered liberal. So yes, I think it's perfectly said it was where you live.
You know, there was a. I don't know if you are the people listening or watching, if you're familiar with the catastrophe facing South Africa, right? They were facing day 0, and that means water is going to run out. And then it rained, so they got some time. I don't know exactly what's going on right now, but there was a video that was getting a lot of play because it was 2 guys fighting each other over water rationing. You know, they showed up to this like a government assistance thing where they were giving out water to people who already didn't have any. And then, like, some dudes started fighting because they're like, I need this water. And I don't think people realize there are parts of the U.S., I don't know about even right now, but during the drought in California, I think they've replenished the water reservoir. But I went out and interviewed people. There was East Porterville. It's a city in California. And during the drought, no water at all. None. One day, I interviewed this kid. He said one day the water kept coming out little by little, like less and less every day, until one day he turned it on and nothing came out. And I'm like, what do you do? And he's like, we had to go and find water, like no showers, no drinking water. And, so I guess I'll throw this question at you. First, we'll leave that point as it is, that the parts of the U.S. have faced, droughts and lack of water. This is really affecting Americans. And now we'll throw it to the next point. How long can someone last without water?
3 days.
3 days?
Yeah.
So if you woke up one day and
well, that's the general rule. If you're in a hotter climate or you're physically exerting yourself even more, then less. But no longer than 3 days, typically.
So,
speaking.
If one day you woke up and there was no water,
you'd have 3 days.
So, but that means you should now go find water now.
Yes. You don't want to. On one of my bug out trips, I ran out of water. It was a 40-mile hike.
Ooh.
We were constantly moving, and it was on the second day. So we're about probably 12, 15 miles in, and we ran out of water. And
Well,
yeah, because I take guests, or there's more than one bug out boy.
But I just mean, it's one thing if one person needs water. Now you gotta find water for everybody.
Yeah, it was 2 of us on that particular trip.
Okay.
And so we're going down, and we're looking, going to these stream beds, and all these stream beds are just dry. And and it was, I think it was in July.
Oh man.
It's a good episode. I recommend reading, but we find this eventually. Spoiler alert. We find this little, might have been only about this big, long, about this deep.
So that's like, what is that, like 3.5 feet? Some people won't see the cameras.
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
no,
we're
it's
on iTunes.
Probably about maybe 4 feet long by about 6. We'll give it a foot wide.
Yeah.
And about, I would say, 4 inches deep with water. Just this
mud pit.
Well, yeah. It wasn't mud. It was water in there, but it was just saturated with leaves. It was brown, and we got down there, and we used our filters to try and make sure that we stayed safe from any sort of bacteria or protozoa or anything like that. But you still could taste the acridness of it.
Oh man.
Did not care.
Yeah.
We did not.
Can I just say that back home I've got a nice case of spring water, and I have a Brita filter on my water faucet. Right. Only the best water for us city folk. We don't have to worry about disgusting. But I always I think Ben, going back to the question, it's a funny question to ask, but I consider myself liberal. I think liberal. I think I'll survive.
You're already ahead of the game.
Yeah, but also at the same time, I'm a conflict reporter. I've been overseas. I've been in these countries. Like being in Egypt, I have a mind for like, if something happens, where are my exits?
Hair stands on the back of your neck. Start looking for
But even like walk, when you're in a place where it's dangerous, then your mindset changes. And I know journalists who have gone to like hurricanes and disasters, and it's really hard because you have to bring enough water for your trip, because otherwise, people are there are dying. They need water, they need supplies.
It's about a gallon a day usually.
Man, I don't drink enough water.
Well, again, physical exertion put in there, but the safe bet is if you have a gallon a day per day, a gallon per day.
It's a lot of water.
And each gallon weighs 9 pounds.
I think
it's a lot of weight for you to be carrying.
Yep. So one thing that always struck me as crazy is that growing up in Chicago, living in LA, living in New York, I don't know anybody with emergency water, with emergency food. Do you have emergency water? You're a survivalist. Yeah. I would assume you've got supplies.
Oh yeah, I got bunch of different ways of purifying water. If I were to run out of water, I have water in my house. I definitely have plenty of food in my house that I have canned food that I've canned myself.
Whoa, really?
Oh yeah. But yeah, well, like I said, it keeps on expanding my self-reliance, and now I am gardening, and now canning my own food.
Can you build your own radio?
Yeah,
that's
not yet, but I was doing some soldering on my bug-out vehicle, so it'll give me some time.
You know what would be cool? You should get a soldering iron powered by pedaling a bike, right? Then you don't gotta eat.
Right.
But actually, it's
back to the person who's on the bike for me. Like, hold on,
and I think you might need like a decent amount of energy. It's a lot of pedaling. But the other thing too is I think what's one thing that's really funny about just like survival, catastrophe, preparedness, we try our hardest to consume the most amount of food with the least amount of energy in it. You know what I mean? Like diet foods are specifically meant to fill you up but provide you with less energy than other things.
You're going to want the exact opposite.
Exactly.
You're going to want those fats, those calories. You're going to want calories, fats, and proteins.
And so
a lot of them.
Yes. And but that's when it comes to like these people who build these bike generators, when like if we do face a catastrophe, you don't want to waste energy riding a bike. You need to save as much energy as possible to live.
Well, I think it's like what they say, like if you don't have to run, walk. If you don't have to walk, sit.
Sleep.
If you don't have to sit, lay down.
Yeah.
That's kind of like depending on your food situation.
But we're so, man, and I could be wrong, but I feel like this is like more heavily city folk are just so pampered and comfortable.
I think that's why they moved there.
Oh, you think that they're lazy?
No. Well, no, I wouldn't. No, because a lot of people in cities work very hard. There's a lot of people that work, but I feel that the mindset is if you move to a city, you will have that safety.
It's convenience, basically.
Yes, it's
yeah.
Yep. You walk to your little bodega store right down the street from you, whereas someone who lives out in the country is going to have to drive anywhere between 5 to a half an hour to get the groceries.
I had a kind of epiphany, and I think for everybody who's made it this far will probably appreciate this story if they are, survivalist or conservative. They might relate to this. I moved out to I was about 40 miles west of Miami. So in the Miami area, in a place called the Redlands, farmland, the nearest police department to me was like half an hour. So I don't exactly know what the distance was, but if I made a phone call, if my phone even worked, because there was very weak cell service, they'd say, good luck.
Right.
Like, they wouldn't literally say good luck. They'd be like, when I was talking to one of the locals, they told me that the cops usually say, do you have a gun?
Oh, really?
Yeah, because they're not going to make it.
What is Florida? They are gun-friendly there.
Yeah, really gun-friendly. They were like, come in, you can buy a gun.
Pretty much.
And, side note, I've actually talked to some, 2A proponents, like guns enthusiasts and instructors who are like, some of these rules are too lax. And I was like, really? And they were like, oh, man, like Florida and Virginia, it's easy compared to a lot of places.
I didn't know about Virginia, but I did know that.
When I
really, even just to get your CCL in Florida is very easy.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So anyway, I'm living in Florida, and I heard from my landlord. They said, heads up, somebody who lives about 2 blocks away from you was just murdered. He was taking a shower. He heard noises, was walking downstairs, and took 2 to the chest. I questioned that story because I'm like, how do you know he heard noises? And like the police assumed that because he walked down in his towel when his bedroom's upstairs, they assumed that he was in his shower, he got out, he heard rustling, went downstairs, and then went pop pop, killed him. Mm-hmm. And so I had a .22 air rifle with pellet gun, just break barrel, pow. And I'm not, I'd only ever fired a gun. I had fired a gun one time. And at that point, I had fired, I believe, 10 rounds at a shooting range because I was working on a documentary. And so here I am at home, hearing the story, and I had the pellet gun for fun. I was like, hey, man, we were shooting CO2 tanks. It was a big 5-acre property. So we were shooting when they would fly off like rockets. One day, in the middle of the night, it was like midnight, me, my couple friends, my friend's girlfriend, cooking pizzas. We would buy these pizza crust, makes pizza. We would make our own pizzas from scratch and just mess around. When all of a sudden we saw someone with a flashlight on our property, and we have like a 6-foot high fence surrounding the whole thing. We were in the middle of nowhere. It's pitch black. It was beautiful. You go out and look at the moon and the stars. But now there's someone searching through, like, we had a barn in the back, and so we're now concerned. Okay, we can't call the cops. There's no way the police will get here. This person's literally 100, 200 feet in front of us.
Good luck.
We were just warned that somebody had been murdered a couple blocks away by a home invader. What do we do? So I took my my .22, with no pellet in it, and just broke the barrel, opened the door, and yelled, "Hey!" really loud, and bam in the air, and then heard running, light turned off. Assume they left. I said, I don't know. I went back inside, locked the door, and then I actually put a pellet in the 22, but I didn't compress it, so it wasn't ready to shoot. It wasn't armed. And then we were just like, whoa, what was that? And so for me, that was kind of like I wanted to live out in the middle of nowhere because I wanted to have fun. I wanted to be loud. I wanted to play guitar. I wanted to skate in my backyard. There was like a flat concrete area where you could skate, and I wanted to shoot CO2 canisters with my BB gun.
There's a lot of fun to be had out in the country.
Yeah, just to be by yourself. Like, I had neighbors, but you just wanted to chill. And then that happened, and I was like, I kind of understand why people are, why there's, when it comes to the gun debate, it's the urban versus rural. Because people who live in cities, like, higher propensity for accidental injury and shootings when you're surrounded by that many people, especially when you have people literally living on top of you, underneath you.
Well, yeah, if they have the wrong type of round in their gun.
Oh yeah, but not even that. It's like when you live in a rural area, county area, there's less people around, meaning less likelihood for accidental accidents in general. Yeah. I think there's certain accidents that are going to happen no matter what, but when you're in a city that's so dense and there's people everywhere, then someone might actually, if you're in the country and you act in an accidental discharge, there's less people around to get hit.
Right.
The other thing too is in the city, if this is what I had this realization, and I was talking to a friend of mine who was like super anti-gun, and I said, I never experienced this until I lived in the middle of nowhere and really had to rely on myself for security. But what could I have done in a situation like that? The police wouldn't make it. I could just let the person come in and kill me.
Or take your stuff.
Yeah, I don't know if they wanted to kill me, but someone had been killed recently. And in a city, if you're in an apartment and someone kicks the door in and starts yelling, telling you to get on the ground, someone heard that.
Right.
And so the likelihood that someone's going to be able to call the police and help you is
higher.
Much higher.
Then again, you're also hoping that person that doesn't stare you in the eye on the street actually decides to call the police for your benefit. But yes.
But it's, if someone...
There's a higher percentage that someone will call for you.
They're going to hear it. There'll be a witness and...
There'll be a witness and everything. Whereas
man,
yeah, no.
I was out in the middle of nowhere.
Right.
And it was like, you've got no one but yourself. Right. And so for me, I was kind of... I've never really had strong opinions one way or the other on guns. My dad was a Marine. My brother's in the Army, so I'm like, I don't think it's so simplistic to be like guns are evil and kill people and like we should ban all guns or anything like that. Mm-hmm. But I certainly think like, man, we should have some kind of, I don't know enough to say this, but I've always been kind of moderate because I feel like we could do something. There is a solution. We don't know what it is. I don't think the left has the answer. I think some people on the right might be too extreme, but I just don't know. So I kind of keep my nose out of it. But then when I experienced, this thing in Miami, I was like, I kind of feel like I understand, people who live in the country and why they're like, we need guns for self-defense.
Right, yeah.
And it was interesting because...
For yourself and for the property that you're most likely relying on.
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, I had friends, it's me and my friends, we're living, we're trying to, mind our own business, have a good time and just be, I don't want to say dumb kids because we're like 30, but we wanted to just, just chill and just have and goof off and not bother anybody. That was really it. We wanted to get a big space so that we wouldn't bother anybody with our shenanigans. Right. And then what was really interesting is that I'm talking to this friend of mine who is flat out said, she told me, no one ever needs a gun. Seriously, she goes, seriously, can you give me one example, one scenario where someone actually needs a gun? And then I said, let me tell you a story about Miami. And it was interesting because afterwards she was like, oh, I understand that. Mm-hmm. I'm like, yeah, like I understand why in LA, we want less guns you have so many people all around and accidents happen and things like that. Accidental deaths are one of the big reasons they cite for gun control. But when you're out in the middle of nowhere, it starts to make sense. So I guess to bring this all back to the main conversation, this also lends itself to the point of survivability of city dwellers versus, country folk, in that you can, to a certain extent, rely on your neighbor in a city, right? Yeah. When I've had a lot of great experience with neighbors who have helped me out. I've had people, like when you get locked out of your apartment, you can ring your neighbor's doorbell and they'll come down and let you in, and then you have to figure out how to get into the door. That's a whole other story. But typically it's like I think people try to be accommodating. Not everyone's perfect, but
Well, I think they're being accommodating now. Now.
That's exactly where I was going.
Okay.
No, but yeah.
They're being accommodating now because they have everything, and but when they don't have anything, I think that's where you're going to see the flip.
Yep.
You're gonna and at that point it's rats in a cage with no out. No more food and water. They start eating each other.
Oh, dude, that's always the dark path. We can make jokes about zombies, but when you're in a city with millions of people, and the water's gone, and the food's gone, what are these people going to do?
Hopefully they left before that happened.
Oh, people aren't going to leave.
But they're not going to.
No,
exactly. No. If I decided for whatever reason that I wanted to live in a city, in a bit metropolitan area, my first thing is that any hint of danger, which is that's another thing of just being aware of your surroundings. Get out. Get completely out.
I mean, I'll be honest. I really, really don't think, I can't imagine a scenario in my lifetime where New York collapses for any reason. Mm-hmm. But I have slowly moved slightly outside of New York because, man, these past few years have been feeling like it's getting... I mean, look, Trump, 1 year ago, just about 1 year and a few days, Trump fired 59 Tomahawk missiles at Syria. And Russia was like, don't do that. And before Trump got elected, Hillary Clinton said we need a no-fly zone over Syria. And I can't remember who, I think it was one of a general advised the Senate or something that was tantamount to a declaration of war on Russia. And so as these things have escalated, I'm like, man, wow. Now you've got people screaming, Russian interference, and they're really driving this narrative about like Russia as our enemy. Now you have Trump once again beating the war drums. We're going to send missiles to Syria. And I'm like, I don't think anybody wants to believe that a true catastrophe could actually happen, right? Like, nobody wants to be like, oh yeah, World War III is going to happen. We're all going to die. It's like, it's just so hard to believe. But maybe we're just comfortable. We're becoming complacent and assuming we're safe and everything's going to be okay.
Well, we've also haven't dealt with a real war. I mean, that's impacted the United States for many, 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 many years. Technically, we've got
Pearl Harbor. I mean, Pearl Harbor was technically the last attack on American soil, right?
Was it?
Yes,
yeah. And that was, I mean, that was a long time. That was
that's still
World War II.
That's distant.
I know, yeah, that's
distant American soil.
Yeah.
That's like if someone were to hit Alaska, which I love Alaska, but if someone were to hit Alaska, it's still not the lower 48.
Well,
it's not, but
9/11. It wasn't a nation state,
well, that was
though.
a terrorist attack. That wasn't an army.
Okay, so 2001.
Yeah.
And things changed
I don't know.
The worse.
I'd say there's a difference between like
full-scale invasion and...
I mean, yeah, like Pearl Harbor, you had actual Japanese troops coming to mess our stuff up.
Blowing themselves up, kamikaze.
Right.
Yeah, and then 9/11 was, they took a couple planes. That wasn't really meant to be an invasion of any kind.
Right. But I think the whole war thing with World War II, I mean, we hear stories from our grandparents of, how things were rationed. Rubber was rationed, silk was rationed, metal and everything. I mean, everybody started pitching in. My grandmother, she was a Rosie Riveter, and because she was small enough that she could fit into there's a B-52 bomber, the little globe that was underneath. She could fit in there with the riveter and rivet those gunner ports. So I mean, a whole nation got behind that war, and because you almost had to.
Yeah.
Whereas
we were attacked.
Right.
Yeah.
Whereas there was definitely a faction that was not for Vietnam or for Korea. I mean, especially Vietnam. There's plenty of movies out there where people were like, "We don't want this," and the Vietnam vets actually came back and they were booed and spit upon and not treated very well. They did what their country called them to do.
Made them do.
Made them do. But so, I mean, again, they signed up. You go where your leader tells you to go. But that being said, there hasn't been a war that has affected, I feel, the United States as a whole since World War II. And that then goes right to your point of that we are comfortable, we are complacent, we don't want to.
But you know what's really weird right now is that it seems to be the Trump supporters who are anti-war.
Well, no
So-
one really wants war.
Well, so
Yeah.
for sure, no, for sure. But one of the phenomenon, what's the plural? There's been a phenomenon. There's been a phenomenon online of when it comes to being heavily critical of the war, I'm seeing, like, it's weird. I don't know how to describe it. But there are left-wing activists who have kind of entered their own faction, because when we talk about left-wing activists, we usually refer to like Antifa.
Mm-hmm.
Antifa isn't campaigning against war with Syria right now. They certainly are not for it. But when it comes to the establishment left, like the Democrats and these media companies, like these personalities, they're not coming out against war. They tend to, I mean, at least the way I see it, they're kind of for it. You know, like there's these conversations happening around like, we need to do something about Assad. He's gassing these people, these chemicals. And then you have these Trump supporters who are even yelling, like getting angry at Trump because Trump is beating the war drum.
Well, I mean, maybe that's we could possibly say that because liberals in general are very they're compassionate. In general, they're always trying to.
It's communal. It's right. That's yeah.
Yeah. So in their case, they're seeing the gassing as an atrocity. That these poor Syrians are being gassed, mothers, children, innocents, civilians, and they don't want that. So maybe that's why like their heart is getting ahead of their head. Perhaps I don't know. I'm not a liberal.
But no, there was a Guardian article. There was an op-ed from this guy and he said, "Why is it the far right that is he said something like, why is the far right so opposed to Syrian intervention?" And when I see an article from the Guardian, I'm like, it's not the far right that opposes intervention. It's anti-war people who oppose the intervention, and some of those people happen to be right-wing, conservative, liberal, and far right and far left. But for whatever reason, like the Guardian, this big paper puts out a story acting like it's only the right that's anti-war. That's kind of worrying to me. I don't know why it's strange. Where's the anti-war left? That's like one of the questions that's been, popping up online for a while now.
I don't know. I'm not as informed as you are when it comes to that. I just know that perhaps again it's like the heart's getting the head, and they're the conservatives, hence conservative, slow down protests are saying every war you got to count your costs before you go to war, and if you just jump into something like that, because is the nation ready for this?
Yeah, we've never been ready. I mean, the Iraq was a disaster.
Right.
A disaster.
Is the nation ever ready for it?
But
maybe that's the worry.
I guess the reason I bring this up is that the people who are living in these big cities, who are your run-of-the-mill liberal, who would voted for Hillary Clinton or whatever, are the ones who are consuming this media that is pro-intervention. To an extent, I don't want to blanket and be like these people are calling for war. No, but it's like the outcry, the anger is at least perceivably coming from the right. Even to back that up, the Guardian is writing it saying it's the right that doesn't want this, and is that vocal about it. So I'm curious, when it comes to war, at least now, it's the people who live in cities who I would imagine would have a harder time dealing with a catastrophe, who are not screaming about this. I don't know. Am I wrong? Like, Emily, what's your thought on this? Because I feel like I might be off base. I'm not entirely sure.
I don't know. I don't think it's yet easy to narrow it down. I think it really comes down to.
I mean, you could definitely say that those city dwellers have a target on their back.
Yeah.
They're not.
Yeah. Wait, that's the other thing. Like, you'd think the people living in cities would be the ones screaming at the top of their lungs.
Yeah, because they're gonna if there's going to be an attack, they're going to go for the major cities because to do the most damage.
So I wonder.
Military installations as well as major cities. So
yeah,
they're going to want to have
So Trump's second tweet after the missiles to Syria one was that relations with Russia has been far worse, even worse than the Cold War. And I'm wondering, I obviously wasn't alive during the Cold War, but if other people who lived through that would agree with that, because from what I have heard from people who lived through that, they had like the what to do when a bomb goes off sort of drills. Mm-hmm. And we haven't had that yet. We have...
Oh, that's a good point.
No,
yeah.
We haven't any bombs. I mean, I was too young for it as well. My parents would be that generation now.
So how old are you?
I'm 35.
Oh, okay.
So I'm at, yeah.
I'm 32. We were both alive during the Cold War.
We were alive, but we weren't
conscious working human beings.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
We were not, tapped into the political pipelines. So, but yeah, there were raid drills, there were bomb drills.
Fallout shelters.
Fallout shelters, exactly.
So if Trump is going to tweet out that it's worse than the Cold War, I mean, we were really scared of I mean, there's a video game series about the world actually descending into chaos when
yeah,
the nukes.
it's great.
Yeah, Fallout.
Yeah.
I love that game.
I'd love it to just stick to Fallout and not come into the real world.
But yeah, but no, that's a really good point you brought up, Emily. That if Trump is going to say this, but we have no preparation, there's been no preparation. You know, it's really crazy too, because to focus on the survivalist aspect, when you think of what people call preppers, it's like conspiracy theorists.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's got such a bad connotation to it now because of, yes, that, and also, I have to say this, Discovery didn't do them justice with doomsday preppers or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, some of those people had really cool ideas, but they kind of, the way it was edited, the way that the tone of it was that these guys are a little
crazy
off, or have their own conspiracies of what's going to happen. So, yeah.
And then, so I was talking to somebody, like I know a bunch of people who are like libertarian and they like the buy your gold people,
Mm-hmm.
and when it comes to those who would buy emergency food and water and purification stuff, it's always these like these I don't know how to describe it, but it's like anti-establishment individuals, regardless of whether they're left or right. It's like people who are really distrustful of the government.
Like sovereign nations?
No, I mean like
Okay.
libertarian people who are like the government is waging wars for profit and military industrial complex, so they buy gold and they buy food. And I'm like, the crazy thing to me is I was thinking about it earlier, and I was thinking about I have Band-Aids in my cupboard. I have not used them in years. Seriously, I don't even know if they're good anymore. And I was like, why do I have them?
Smart.
Well, because you might get a cut. You'll need the Band-Aid.
Right.
I have a fire extinguisher. Never used one in my life.
You might want to check the expiration.
Yeah.
Well, we did. Yeah, I moved into a new place last year, so I'm not saying it's like we just put it in a.
Forget about that.
Yeah, no. But but that's actually another good point, is that we just forget about fire extinguishers. I think my place. Yeah, no, we don't have sprinklers. We have fire extinguishers. But you have all of these things. You have a spare tire. You've got a lot that you will probably never use because, like, well, in case of emergencies. But people in cities don't have like food or water.
Yeah,
They don't. It's crazy.
I find that shocking. I mean, but it's not. But honestly, that is not just cities. I mean, I could probably go.
Oh, no, for
right
sure.
Down the street that I live on and knock on it. Like, do you have any extra this or that? No,
Right.
So no.
But in the city, I know people who don't have any food at all in their house, at all.
Okay.
You have food in your house.
Yeah.
You have canned goods.
Well, yeah.
There are a lot of people in the city who do, but in Brooklyn, for instance, people go out to eat.
Or people just order delivery.
Yep.
Over
No,
and over.
seriously.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a
Now
huge.
You got every app on your phone now where you can just, or I can say, Alexa, buy me food.
You walk to the, but not even that. Look,
It shows up on your door.
there are bodegas. Bodega is what you call corner stores in New York, for those that aren't familiar. And when I lived in Brooklyn, we would just walk downstairs, and we'd go in and buy what we needed for that moment, and we would cook what we needed for that day. And we had very, very, very little food in the actual house. Maybe some condiments. I go to my buddy's house, his fridge, some pita bread maybe, nothing really. You go the further you get from the city, it's less convenient to have food available for purchase right there next to your apartment or your home. So people have a cupboard with canned goods.
And that, I
You'll have a
think
freezer.
brings you right back to that people are living because it's convenient.
Yeah.
The security, so to speak, is conveniently close. Your food is conveniently close. You all have running water. It never goes away. It's that idea of that they don't have to worry about it or want to.
So let's we're getting close to the end, but we'll take the next 15 minutes or so to just talk about some general tips, I guess. Okay. So do you want to just regardless of whether you're liberal, conservative, or wherever you live, what's some good advice?
Okay, some good advice. So you definitely should have water, some sort of non-perishables in your house. I mean, you don't have to go crazy with MREs, though they are a good way to go, but just canned food. I mean, think about it in days, like how many days of food do you want? And I would have to say like a week's worth is a good, because I mean, my show always deals with 72 hours. The bug out values for 72 hours. Because typically speaking, within 72 hours, help has arrived, someone's gotten there to bring things together, but you need to plan past that, especially if you're like in a city. If you don't have a lot of places to store water, you might not like it, but the back of your toilet, that's potable water back there. You might feel a little.
What about in the toilet?
That technically that's potable too, but I would definitely run that through a filter first because you will be having the bacteria from yourself.
Oh,
there.
for sure.
Yeah, I would
but
definitely be running that. I would go with the back first before you go.
but
You're
I
thirsty.
exactly
You're thirsty.
like people might not want to hear this, but you will be capable of things you never thought possible when you are dehydrated, when you are starving.
Oh yeah. When I ran out of water, and I've run out of food. I've been on those lines, and you'd be very surprised.
Man.
Let's see another thing. Some of it I did that by choice, just so I had the
Yeah.
experience. Your hot water heater. Hot water heater has gallons of water in it, and what you can do is just like every couple months drain the bottom just to kind of get that sediment out of the bottom, and then just let it fill back up, and then that's a big chunk of water that can really help you out if you have not stored water. If you live in the city, I would suggest that you plan to get out as quickly as possible.
What if you're in like the central Brooklyn?
Yeah, it's gonna be tough, but you're gonna figure it out. Have some
So-
sort of escape route.
So let's start here. Why do you think? We did talk about this earlier, but let's go over some points as to why you think a city would be so dangerous in the event of a catastrophe.
Just the same rats in a cage.
Just fighting, starving, hungry.
Yeah, I mean, 3 days, all the food, and assuming that water's not running anymore. So no more water, no more food. Everybody has had the cupboards like your friend with just a little bit of peat in it.
Yeah.
Your criminals, they're not going to want to go hungry, and no one else is going to have guns. The police are going to be completely overrun with just you're just normal people rioting, trying to break in and get stuff. Then you have your criminal element that's going to be combative. It's not just taking away from the civilians, but combating the police force. It's going to take way too long, I feel, to mobilize any National Guard, to get in there to start assembling order, and that's just even assuming if you can get it back up and running. So you're really going to have the worst. I know that people like to think that people are inherently good, and I think
Not when they're hungry.
Not right. But, I think you said something. If you think that people are inherently good, go to a country outside the United States.
Yeah. So we were talking a little bit before we set up, and I mentioned, actually you mentioned that when people accuse you of having no faith in humanity, when you're as being a survivalist.
Yeah, when I do my conflicted cards on the show, there's some people say I'm a little bit rough, I guess you'd say. Like I'm not gonna do this or that, and they say like, well, you don't have a lot of faith in humanity or your fellow man, and we were discussing that.
Yeah,
and
and
brought
then
this great point.
Go to a conflict zone. Go to a country that's facing civil war or riots, and I mean, look, when it comes to even the stuff we've seen in the U.S. with like Antifa versus Trump supporters, both sides are the good guys. They both sides believe they're the ones fighting for what's right. So you want to have faith in humanity, you might meet an individual who says, we need to do this thing because it's the best thing for humanity. Okay, I have faith this person believes they're doing good. Does that mean they're gonna? No. Does it mean they're gonna hurt somebody? Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Even when things are good, people fight. So what do you think is going to happen when you take these people who are armed, who are agitated, and now they're hungry and thirsty?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, they're going to say, listen, you're going to have people who are going to be like, we're the good guys, everything's falling apart. If we don't take control, bad things are going to happen. Now you have warring factions.
Well, as simple as I have 3 kids to feed, and you don't.
Oh, but they're going to say, you know what, man? The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. You have 3 kids, I understand, but there are millions of people in New York City who need supplies, and I will kill you if that's what it takes. Like,
Right. And then that
that's a
person's gonna say, "I'm gonna
hypothetical
kill you."
quote, not me.
Right, but and then that person's going to come back and say, I'm going to kill you because I need to feed my kids.
Yeah.
So that right there is just, and that's neighbor on neighbor.
So going back to like cities, when you were talking about that, like the problems of rats in a cage, I'm thinking, man, cities are just getting bigger though, aren't they? Like more people are moving to cities, gentrification, expansion, urban sprawl.
Mm-hmm.
Like what's going to happen in 50 years, 100 years when these cities are just stacked on top of each other to like an exponential, just like nonstop. And then it feels to me it feels like a house of cards. Like it becomes harder and harder to function as the roads get more and more congested.
Mm-hmm.
Less people drive, but now the trains in New York are getting all screwed up. Like, at what point do we reach critical mass and we're like...
Somebody should just start a new city already.
Oh, yeah.
Like, we've already got enough people.
Was it in Miramar? Miramar, they built the new capital city away from Rangoon.
Oh, I don't know.
Or no, what's the Naypyidaw is the new capital of Miramar instead of Rangoon, and they built it, and they have a 20-lane highway.
Oh, yeah. Is that in China? Where is that?
That's in Myanmar.
Oh,
No,
okay.
it's Burma.
Oh, yeah. There you go.
It's Myanmar.
Yeah. And there's still traffic on it, wasn't there?
No, there isn't any.
No,
No one
okay.
lives there.
Oh,
It's
okay.
like the city of the future. Like no.
Yeah, but hey,
Wow.
man, there's this like thought experiment where they say you have a jar and there's a bacteria in it. Every minute that bacteria will double.
Mm-hmm.
So a minute later you have 2. A minute later you have 4, 8, 16, 32, 64. And then eventually at some point the jar is half full. And the bacteria say, hey, in 1 minute we're going to be overpopulated. We need to find a new jar. And so they find a new jar. And then a minute goes by, and now the bottle is full because everyone keeps doubling. And they say, great, now we'll all move to the new bottle. A minute later, both bottles are full. A minute's going to go by, and they need 2 bottles now.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like they can build the city, they can have these 20-lane highways, but at what point is it going to become overrun again?
Well, also interesting enough, I forget the doctor right now. He wrote a book, but he said The Secret Nim. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah,
The
I
cartoon?
I
Yeah.
barely remember
Miss
it, but
Frisbee and everything. So, but that's kind of based on this real scientist that actually took instead of rats, he took mice, and he put them in an environment where they had all the food, all the water they could ever eat, and so they propagated, but he was noting that at a certain point,
they started eating each other.
they
No,
didn't-
I'm kidding.
Well, no, the mothers stopped taking care of the young, and they would move from different neighbors, and young would be left behind.
Whoa.
The mice were not procreating anymore. There were certain male mice that just hung out at the water, and just decided to fight all the time. and it became to the point that the many generations, because he did this over years, that the latter generations of these mice didn't know how to do anything anymore.
Whoa.
Like they didn't know how to live. They didn't know how to build a nest. They
That's
didn't know how to-
exactly what's happening.
And ultimately, I forget what
City mice.
the city. Well, I forget what he called them, but I guess the community died. It died
Yeah.
out in a certain amount of years because once it reached a certain zenith of population, even though everything was taken care of, temperature and everything, it was overcrowded. People didn't like things, and people didn't. And since
That's cool.
they didn't have to hunt for food anymore. They didn't have to forage. They didn't have to worry about anything. They never learned those skills.
Yeah.
Because they didn't learn those skills. When it came down to it, they perished.
That is
There's
creepy.
Quite a few parallels that
Yeah.
one may be able to draw between them and.
You know what, man? Maybe the end of the world isn't going to be an external threat. It's not going to be a meteor. It's not going to be zombies. It's not going to be aliens. It's going to be the fact that we've lost our ability to survive.
Could be.
There'll come a point where we're like, have you ever seen Idiocracy?
I am not. I need to get around.
But it's like the dude just sitting in his chair and like,
watering plants with Gatorade, right?
yeah, like, right. We come to a point where we've just lost our understanding of how things function.
Yeah, and if it breaks, who fixes it?
Yeah.
And so a simple break could be like, how do you fix your watch? Or then you don't know how to tell time anymore.
I mean, actually, here's a really good point. We've had what are suspected cyber attacks on our internet infrastructure.
Yes.
Right. So what would happen if the internet goes down? We've made certain aspects of our society obsolete already. People don't have landline phones anymore.
Correct.
So what happens if the cell tower gets knocked out?
No communication.
No communication.
No communication. And that
Yeah.
causes chaos very
Yep.
quick.
Yep. Communication is one of the most. I mean, it's the most.
A lot of power plants, water, all those, they've cut back on employees because now it's all fully automated through computers.
Oh boy.
Oh, we're heading.
What could possibly go wrong?
Right, exactly. So you get in there.
Okay. I gotta say it from the sounds of this conversation with the way things are going, power plants automating, they're slowly gonna start having failures, and then we're not gonna be able to fix them, and we're gonna end up in this future where the world is just slowly decaying. You gotta. I'm telling you, everybody, you gotta buy your gold. Yeah, I'm just totally kidding. I'm kidding. I don't know what's gonna happen. I think humans adapt. I think humans survive. We're not mice.
No, we're not.
Yeah, so maybe, but I think like the point of this conversation was just that there is an assumption that liberals can't survive an apocalypse.
Right.
And the Daily Show mocked a fat guy with a katana, but it really might just come down to not the politics but the location. You're in a city.
Well, I think it does have a lot to do with people, though, the individual people, whether they are independent or reliant on other people, other ways
Yeah.
of getting what they need to survive.
Yeah.
Well, so I think you maybe mentioned that a little bit earlier, but maybe that's it. The people who move to cities are doing it because of convenience, because it's like someone's going to do something for me, it'll be easier to live.
Yeah.
And the people who, so actually we're getting close to about wrapping up, so I'll just end with this story and we can riff on this a little bit. I knew some people who were granted farmland, some activists from Occupy Wall Street. Someone donated farmland and they said, we are going to get off the grid. We are going to stop contributing to the capitalist system and the imperialism and the pollution and go live on a farm. Awesome. And I always tell people the story. How long do you think they made it? A couple weeks.
Yeah, I said a week.
Yeah.
They made a couple weeks.
And so I asked my friend when they came back, and they said they would wake up at 6 a.m. and work, like physical labor, until 10, 11 p.m., and then with breaks for food and water, but working nonstop because you're growing crops, you're tending to the animals, and it's just nonstop work. Granted, I don't think I think if they would have actually made it longer than that and actually lived on the farm for a while, they would have gotten into the flow of things, gotten good at it, and actually started preserving time and becoming more efficient. But a couple weeks, and they were like, it was too hard.
But you also have to question on their knowledge. Again, they didn't know how to farm because
Yep.
they haven't.
Yeah, they've lost the ability.
They lost. Like that first week just might have just been like,
where's my phone?
yeah, exactly.
Well, did the person who gave them that farmland do it as a test, or were just like, hey, I bet you guys would do great if you went out and did this?
I think it was sincere. It
Yeah.
was like, dude, it'd be so cool if you guys would come here. No one's using the property, and I heard what you said, and here we can do it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm not, so I don't know if everybody left, but I certainly know that a handful of them, the ones that I knew, were like, screw that, we're out.
They go back to the city?
Oh, totally. And here's the thing. It's not that they couldn't do it. They could have. It's just I think they realized how easy city life is. Like, seriously. When we talk about, people talk about like poverty and like minimum wage, and I certainly think, somebody who's doing a job deserves a living wage because they're existing in society and performing a function that we think needs to exist. And if we don't think it needs to exist, then they shouldn't do it. But when you can work at Starbucks and have enough to pay your rent to live in Brooklyn, and like, that means you need very little skills in the United States to live comfortably in a big city. And I don't mean comfortably like actual median, actual like middle class living. I mean like you have a bed and you have a place to live. I mean comfortably relative to favelas in Brazil or Morocco. Like Americans are very wealthy even at the lowest level of employment.
You have a roof that doesn't leak. You have heat.
So
you have maybe air conditioning, or you bought yourself an air conditioning, but you have power. Yeah.
you have running water.
Running
Running water makes you wealthy.
Running water.
Yeah.
They,
When I was in Brazil, we went to one of the favelas. They don't have clean water. They don't have running water. It's improving, and I haven't been there in a few years. But this is going to get gross, so heads up, not super gross, but get ready for it. They couldn't flush their toilets, and so when I asked to use their bathroom, I walked in and walked out because it was a collective of the entire family's day. They couldn't flush, not until it rained.
Yeah.
gotcha.
And so they were happy. They were happy, a happy family with a house, and I was like, it was fascinating to me because we have so much, and we assume like it's poverty. Like seriously, you could have an apartment with clean running water, food every day, and a job, and we consider that sad in the United States. And I certainly think we have a problem with poverty for sure and homelessness, but it's. I think we should actually take a second to look around and be proud of ourselves that when we talk about poverty in the U.S., we are referencing people who have places to live. Not all of them, but there's a decent amount of people who live at the poverty level, have places to live, have food, and have water. I'm like, wow. We need to improve it. We need to solve these problems. But I've been to so many places where when you're poor, you're starving in the street and like about to die.
Right.
And if you're rich, you have like a tiny hut and you might be able to get running water. Mm-hmm. Some of these countries are like really bad,
But I wonder also if the people who are homeless, especially in places like California where they make their own little shanty towns, I feel like they would do quite well during the apocalypse.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Oh,
definitely.
yeah, man.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, the homeless people by far will be some of like the
The
ones
best
who, like,
prepared,
they're
yeah.
the best prepared. I mean, they're not going to be prepared in the sense that they're going to have like stores of food and water.
But they'll know what it
they're gonna
means
know
to
where
live,
go,
like how to survive.
How to
and-
insulate.
How to insulate.
Yeah.
They're going to know all these things because they've done that. They've lived it.
I just thought of
They live it.
a really cool idea for like a post-apocalyptic sci-fi fictional story. 200 years in the future after full-out nuclear catastrophe and economic collapse, and the only people who survived, like the 90%, were homeless, and they had kids, and now their culture is built off of
homelessness.
like the like what you want to like, not homelessness, but the way that some people choose to be homeless full on,
Yeah,
you know.
I know a few.
And they set up tents and they get little shanty towns and they travel around. So that kind of culture,
Oh, no,
that'd be a
manic.
cool story
So,
to
like-
kind of explore a future.
Like almost like gypsy-ish, like gypsy.
But not even. They're not entirely communal.
That's true. They're not. Yeah.
You know, they're just nomadic.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so what happens, like, it would be a fun story to explore of a future where city folk, country folk were all gone, but the homeless survived because they were very, they were, knowledgeable.
That would, I guess, eventually go back to, I guess, more or less hunter-gatherer tribe nations that are more nomadic.
That'd be cool. Cool, fun story. All right, well, it's about that time, so thank you all so much for hanging out, listening. Once again, my name is Tim Poole. I am a journalist, and you can find me on Twitter at Timcast and at youtube.com/Timcast if you're not already there. I have a video every day at 4 p.m., and we do this podcast every Sunday at 4 p.m. It's also on iTunes, so if you are listening on iTunes, give me a good review, please. Or don't, whatever. If you hated the show, then, like, I get what I deserve. Do you want to mention your show and your...
Yes, I am Johnny Benson, also known as Grim on the Bug Out Boys, and you can find me on YouTube, Bug Out Boys TV. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, post a lot of pictures, hints, tips, bug out tips, pioneer preps, a lot of different videos on what you can do to be more self-reliant and be more prepared for all these fun little things that we talked about. So please do come check out, subscribe, like, and I talk back. So say hi.
Cool.
And I'm Emily Molly, also a journalist. I'm on Twitter and Minds at MomesMolly. But also check out the Subverse YouTube page. I just put up a new video that's an interview with a professional escort about sex work, the Sesta Fosta package that just passed, and also Backpage and Section 230.
Cool. So I guess to wrap everything together, will liberals survive the apocalypse? The answer, maybe. Because if you're living in a city, you're in trouble. But if a liberal lives in the countryside, they're in the same boat as a conservative. So it's not even about conservative or liberal.
Mm-hmm.
It's about, I guess, proximity to resources and whether or not you're in a city.
And how independent and self-reliant you are.
Yeah, self-reliant versus self-entitled.
I think there are
Yeah.
correlations between people's politics and their dependence or interdependence, but ultimately, I don't think their political affiliation is the driving force. All right. Well, thank you all so much for watching, and we will see you either tomorrow on my channel or next week. This was the Culture War Podcast.